It's my honor to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, Dr. Mike Hutjens. Dr. Hutjens is a retired extension dairy specialist and professor of animal sciences from the University of Illinois. With a career spanning decades of research and instruction in the fields of dairy nutrition and milk production, Dr. Hutjens is one of the most respected voices in the industry when it comes to animal nutrition. Raised on a Holstein farm in Wisconsin and educated at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Mike has shared his expertise with dairy producers in 46 states, 18 countries, and again here at the Georgia Dairy Conference. Please welcome Dr. Mike Hutjens.
Thank you, Brian. A pleasure. Well, welcome. It's great to be here. You know why? First of all, anybody watch the Bears on TV Sunday night? The Bears? No hands went up. Well, I'll take care of that story. So I know Andy Johnson watched the Bears, and you watched the Bears as well, as far as that goes. You cannot have our coach, but we'll leave it at that. We'll move on. It's great to be here. Why? What was the temperature on Monday morning when I left Champaign, Illinois? -6 wind chill. Needless to say, when you walk into the airport here, you look a bit unusual with this big coat on and stuff like that, but we'll move on. I think we have an exciting topic for you, so hang on. I got some former students here. I told them to start taking notes 5 minutes ago, because they'll never keep up. But let's keep going here. We're off and running. My topic is kind of a fun one, kind of breaks away from some of the previous ones, and said, well, what is this 8-pound club? We hear about that. Very simply, if your cows are producing 8 pounds or more of fat and protein per day, you're in the 8-pound club. And as Andy points out, we now have 9 pounds. The standard used to be 7. Anyway, why is that important? Because it's a nice index. Not so much for you guys and gals. I know where you're going to be, though. This protein thing. How many think that protein is going to get really big here in the future? Besides me. I think that protein's going to come because the world wants what? Animal protein. And you guys had your beef specialist talking about that as well. So hang on to your hats. It's coming at this point. Over 80%, and I was listening yesterday, that number might be a tad low. That's how milk is priced in most places in the United States. 80% based on fat and protein pounds or kilos. But in Georgia, I understand you're not getting paid for protein. So we've de-emphasized this presentation a little bit on the protein, but we'll just touch 3 PowerPoints on it. But remember that bottom one. Is that important for you folks in Georgia, in Florida? Exporting 16 to 18% of the milk. And if we don't get this out of this country, guess what's going to happen to milk price? Ask my Chinese people and the U.S. soybean growers in Illinois what happens to the price of soybeans when we can't get it out of the country. So let's go. Well, here's your prices. How many's seen that change in the last 6 months? Yeah, fat used to be almost $3 a pound, and now that is flipped. That's what the processors are going to be paying for it. Can your dairy farms flip that? Probably not in that short period of time, but those are your milk prices. Now, the next slide simply says, well, can we compete on the world market? This is from Corey. Got this back just before, right around Christmas time, because I don't have access to these numbers. So in the world market on cheese, in the red, $1.34 a pound. Is that really good news compared to those crooks in New Zealand, in the EU, European Union? Yeah, we can move cheese. There's butter. Again, we can really compete. Those can be changed as well. And then, of course, powder. We're in trouble on powder. We can't compete on the powder side of it. But so simply says that's 16 or 18% market. Well, enough of that. Let's get to work. The major emphasis on my presentation for the next 35 minutes, and I say several of you check on your watches. I see that. Milk yield. Why is milk yield important? If you're going to get 8 pounds of solids, you better get some milk out of these cows as well. So peak milk sets the lactation curve. And you only get to do it once. Years ago, you could get it a second time using what? BST. You could get a repeat as far as that goes. Dry matter, and remember, there is no free lunch. If you're going to get high levels of milk and high levels of components, you will have to get the groceries into these girls. So there's a take-home message. You better manage dry matter intake as far as that goes. Feed efficiency, everyone in this room should have that number. What's feed efficiency? It's the pounds of milk per pound of dry matter, corrected on an energy basis. What a wonderful tool. So if that's the only thing you write down and said, Martha, we're going to go home and figure out our feed efficiency, then you had a good meeting as far as that goes. Body condition score, when you look at dry matter, is important. See, it's a plus. Early lactation, what do those cows do with those dry matters if they do it, with that body condition score, if they do it right? Source of energy. Now, if they're way too heavy, like some of your speakers used to be, then it's a big negative. So body condition score, now quit that laughing over here, Paul. Just stay calm. We move on. And then the one we'll not talk about all today. But if you're going to really drive milk yield, you better get the transition program right. And several of your speakers already referred to it. Now, those of you taking pictures, and I saw several of you, this is one you want to take. This slide, your data is here, believe it or not. This is DHIA from North Carolina, done in 2025. And it simply says, what's the relationship? This is your tool. Because what is it doing? First of all, it's looking at first, second, third lactation cows. Then we're looking at 3 different levels of milk production. These would be Wisconsin cows. These would be Illinois cows, right down there. So you can pick and choose. Over here, it looks at peak milk, the ratio of peak milk to total production. Remember, we went to class, where were my students sitting over there? Thumb rule always was multiply peak milk by 200, 225, and that should be your lactation total. Do you see what I see there? Almost 300 here for first lactation animals. Even at lower levels of production. Here's second, about 240. Here's your old thumb rule, about 200. Now, what else is exciting here? Well, the first 40 days, here comes your fresh pen. So how is your fresh, let's say you've got second lactation cows, you're running a 26,000 pound herd average. In the first 40 days, that group of cows, summarize, should be 94 pounds of milk. That's the peak. Remember, all cows peak. The question is, did you get the true peak? Because the true peak should be sitting right over here. And lo and behold, the data doesn't lie. There you can see that's where the real true peak is going to be. So there's another take-home message. Are you getting the right peaks? And are you getting them at the right time? And look at the database down here. We've got almost 4,000 pound herds. These are your herds that goes through Raleigh, North Carolina, as far as that goes. What a powerful roadmap, because it answers the question, how is my herd doing relative to milk yield and lactation number out there as well? Now, not to cause a problem, here's that same Jersey data. Now, I'm not going to walk you through it, but it's there. And these PowerPoints would be all with your sponsor hold. Anybody who wants them, you can have at them. So if you've got jerseys, take a picture of this dude here. Look at the peak milk ratios. I was surprised. They're almost identical. We move on. What about this feed efficiency? Well, there's only 2 good things that ever came out of Ohio. One of them is this chart from Ohio State, and the other one is I-74 and 70. That's the only 2 good things. Anybody from Ohio here? You're okay. We'll go slower for you folks. You'll be okay. We'll go slower. Okay. Norman St. Pierre puts this together, and it simply shows what, guys and gals, as you go down in milk yield, feed efficiency goes up, which means what? Your cows are making more milk out of each pound of dry matter. Powerful message. Now we're going to tell you how much that's worth in just a few minutes as far as we go as well. The ones that Andy was talking about, these 140-pound cows, they never had those at Ohio State, so they couldn't put that on the chart. So they'd have to go back to Andy and get that data. But those numbers obviously get better. When those numbers start getting over 1.9 to 2, what does that mean? If you look at nutrition, it says they can't make that milk with a feed efficiency at 2. They are doing what? Burning fat, borrowing from the bank. And much like you, your dairy cows have to pay the bank back. There's no free lunch as far as that goes as well. What's that worth? Most of my dairy farmers in Illinois are going to be sitting right down here, 1.5 to 1.6. Now, if you look at that, and you can get that same milk, and there's all the numbers up there listed at 80 pounds, 13 cents per pound of dry matter, every one of you dairymen have to know that number. And if you don't, you go home and figure that out. How much it costs you to put those groceries in front of those guys. Take a look at that. There is 39 cents a day And those cows that go from 1.5 to 1.6, if it goes to 1.7, not quite as much money, but what? 39 cents laying on the table. Could that be important to my Illinois dairy farmers this year with today's milk price? Wow. So we're going to find you about 50 cents before this whole talk's over. Here it is. Here's a large share of it as far as that goes. So, what are some of the take-home messages? Andy always says, gotta have take-home messages. Well, first of all, if we back up, we got 4 buttons up here and we're having real challenges. We'll move on. Gotta have a close-up dry cow group. If you do not have a close-up dry cow group, shame on you. Shame on you. Because we're going to go in there and 2 important things are going to happen. Number one, we're going to put it somewhere to manage blood calcium for older lactation cows. And you can do that with a decant product, with zeolite. We can argue that over a cup of coffee if you wish. But you have to do that. 3rd, 4th, 5th lactation cows. And then second of all, these cows in the last 21 days, what is that calf doing inside of that cow? Rapidly growing. And so I'm going to get more amino acids to those cows. And the word is amino acids, because what's happening now in dairy nutrition? We're not balancing anymore on crude protein or metabolizable protein. We are now balancing for amino acids, just like those poultry and swine people are. And I know we have several booths out here that are selling methionine. How many here are adding methionine to the close-up ration? Got some hands going up. And that's because the research says it does a lot of neat things out there in that close-up dry cow ration. Fresh cow. You got to have a fresh cow group for the same reason. For the first 21 days, I've got to make sure I get enough nutrients in whatever dry matter those cows are going to eat. That could include amino acids, it could include energy, whatever I can get that job done, but still not run into metabolic disorders, because that'll really put the old tax on those cows if we got ketosis or milk fever, retained placenta, or mastitis, whatever word you want there. And we got to manage dry matter intake. It is what it is. Late lactation group. Trying to get my Illinois is a tough sell. Average herd size about 200 cows. How many groups of cows do you think we have in a 200 cow dairy? Maybe 2, maybe 3. I want a late lactation group because everybody has these late lactation cows. I'm guessing 10% of the cows are going to be in the late lactation group. These are cows that never established good peak, lower energy milk. They're not pregnant in time, couldn't get them bred. We heard about that earlier today. And we got some heavy cows. And they're going to be in that pen, that high pen, for another 60 days. Good luck. Because they're going to be like some of your previous speakers, well-rounded. And then, of course, we all heard about first lactation or heifer groups. We'll let you work that as well. What are people calling this? Precision nutrition. We're going to try to target nutrients to the needs of those cows and those groups there. And you got some big herds here in Georgia. And you got the opportunity to do it. Not like us guys in Illinois. We only have one herd, over 1,000 cows. And guess what he's doing? One group TMR. It's so much simpler on the farm to feed a one group cow ration to 12 groups of cows. 12 groups of cows. We have those arguments. He also feeds an empty bunk. We have that argument too. Because he said, he's Dutch. You know what those Dutch guys are? They're kind of tight. I'm Dutch. And so as a result, he doesn't waste any feed. He calculates feed efficiency every day in those 12 pens at 3 in the morning. And then he combines that into a weekly value because there's too much variation going on from day to day. 6 below 0 might have had a little impact on that herd out there as well. And he got the formula 2 years ago for energy-corrected milk. It used to be just total milk. Now he's going to energy-corrected milk. So managing dry matter, we already covered most of this stuff here. Number 2 is a new kid. We're trying to get our dairymen to calculate the level of undigestible NDF in the feeding program. Why could that be important? Well, I have too much undigestible NDF. We call that a fill factor. The cows get filled up before they meet their true nutrient requirement. And they don't get enough. You too can have rumen dysfunction. low butterfat tests. Problems out there. The magic number we think is about 10%. And guess what really drives that, guys and gals? Your forage program really drives that bugger. Really drives it out there as well. Now that's a really soft number. Don't take that one to the bank right away and bet a lot of money on it. Some people don't believe in that, but it really makes sense to this crook that a 10% number is kind of the sweet spot. And that's why some of you have what? BMR corn silage, low lignin alfalfa, low BMR sorghum, because the undigestible NDF is going to be what? Lower in the program. Now this is a whole talk for another day. Whoops, wrong button again. Did I blind somebody over there? We move on. This is the data. You'll see it in horse dairymen. The next issue, this shows where the corn silage is. They did not break this down. This comes from Dairyland Labs. They did not break down the southeast. My apologies. They got 4 regions, but southeast was one of them. But to me, that's the big 4. So if you think you've got good corn silage, I will argue you're going to look at moisture for fermentation, starch, NDF, 30 hours. We can argue that a bit later if you want. And there's my UNDF. There's 10. A lot of your grasses and alfalfas are going to be what? 15 or 16 UNDF. See where this is going? If we got BMR, it's going to move that number even lower, probably closer to 7 or 8 out there in the program. So to me, that's corn silage. Now, I have just one more, and that's sorghum. Who's raising sorghum here? Anybody raising sorghum here in the crowd? A couple hands going up. We're seeing more interest on that because we were in a drought last year in central Illinois. We lost about 10 bushels of corn because it got dry and the corn did not fill and did not properly pollinate. So here's a nice listing, comes from Texas A&M, and there's lots of different kinds of sorghum silage out there. There they are. I'm not going to read them to you. They're out there as well. But now we have something known as a berry processor. Much like on the corn silage processing. We can crush those berries. Because if you see those berries coming through in the manure, guess what? Have the kids go out and pick them out, run them through again, and crush them this time. So if you see an intact kernel of corn, or intact kernel of cottonseed, or internal sorghum seed, all you got was the outside covering that might have been associated with that one as well. This is some study that comes from Rock River. And again, they do it by region. This is a very busy slide. I didn't want those mastitis guys think that we nutritionists can't bury you in drawings, but here we go. And this simply shows you, this is NDF digestibility. And 2 things to see. Notice this is the midpoint. 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviations for you statisticians. But you can see that these NDFs are sneaking over, which means it's probably not going to compete with your corn silage, assuming you got water, rain, hurricanes, whatever you want to have. And notice the shape of those curves. Not much curve there at all, which means tremendous variation in sorghum silages. You look at the corn silage curves, and they are also. You go see those curves. They're all in the Hordes Dairyman webinar that a colleague and I presented in December. So you can go see all these curves. And look at the curves. Take a look at the curves. So that's NDF digestibility. This is TDN. There's also one on starch. You know what's going to happen with starch compared to corn. It's heading south. It's heading south, lower in starch. So there's a whole bunch more. And so we want to try to stay on time as best we can. Now, I got a clock up here someplace, and I don't see it. We'll move on. Someplace. So let's talk a little bit about economics as we wrap up here on dry matter intake. Remember, high-producing cows make you the most money. So the quicker we can get these good cows pregnant and back in the milking herd, the better off we're going to be. There's other reasons as well. But look at the economics. Even I can figure this out. Remember I said a pound of dry matter cost me 13 cents? Researchers say I should get 2+ pounds more milk for each pound of dry matter. I call that marginal dry matter. That's that last pound. I don't have to pay maintenance charge on that. I don't have to worry about heat stress or whatever deductions I have to take. But I'll get 2 pounds of milk, keep it simple. 2 pounds of milk right now in Illinois, probably worth about 20 cents a pound with higher components. So it simply says for a Dutch guy, I put 13 cents in my good cow, I get 40 cents back. There's another 27 cents I can clip in that farm. Okay, let's go to number 2. I still got your attention. We're still talking Georgia, Florida, or points north. What about milk fat? Still important. So where does all this change come from? Gosh, if you're Holstein, if you don't have 4.2, 4.3, you're pretty plain Jane right now in milk fat. So where'd that come from? Unfortunately, or fortunately, genetics, we think is huge. We can get a big argument about that in discussion period. One group said about 70% of the milk fat because you guys and gals started breeding for fat. You should have been breeding for protein at the same time. But talking to one of the AI guys last night, he says they've got bulls that they feel they can get protein on them. We better get that there in fact. There's been some movement on jerseys, although Cal said that number slowed down if you hear. But jerseys and crossbreedings were very popular 3 or 4 years ago. That may be slowing down. If forage quality becomes big, you'll see why. Improved feed efficiency. Got a whole bunch of products out there in your display board that says we can make this rumen give you more product. And then finally, we're feeding fat. Talking with Paul, eyes wide open on that one here in just a minute. And there they are all listed. So I've got a new breeding program. There is a chance for you to buy in. See me after the presentation. This is my new crossbreeding program. The front half is Holstein, and the back half is jerseys. And that's the best of both worlds. Although some of you Holstein guys will say, I think we're there already. I think we're there already. Anyway, David, you can buy in. You can be an early in. Paul's mystified over here. We'll move on. We'll move on. Now, where does all that milk fat come from if you're a nutrition? It's going to come from 2 sources. Number 1, rumen VFAs. That's why you want to have that rumen really cooking for you. Acetate, butyrate, half the butterfat is built by the mammary gland. The magic word is what? De novo. Boy, Wisconsin farm boy would never figure that word out. De novo synthesis. The other half comes from blood lipids. That's why cows in the first 40 days can have high butterfat tests, because they're doing what? They're mobilizing body fat, and the mammary gland says, aha, I can make milk fat out of that. I can make milk fat out of that as well. Or that's why you're feeding cottonseed. Or if you're Illinois, you're going to feed what? Roasted soybeans. Roasted soybeans. We move on. This comes from Heather Dan, Minor Institute. And now there are co-ops in northeastern part of the United States in which they take the milk fat, and they'll tell you what percent of the milk fat is being made in the mammary gland, de novo, and what percent is coming from basically diet or the body fat. How many think that could be a pretty useful tool to know? Yeah, really useful. So if you are feeding fuzzy cottonseed, then I would expect to see a higher number over here in the preformed area. Well, holy smokers, Mike. We'll get it right over here. So that's another useful tool that may be coming in the future. We don't have in Illinois yet. We move on. How many heard about the new oleic soybeans coming from Pioneer or Corteva? Big news. Why is it big news? Because it's a different kind of fatty acid. So yeah, depending on which kinds of fatty acids you are feeding your cows will make a difference in cow response. And the good stuff is oleic. Now you can also get that from olive oil. I'm not sure you want to go to Costco and buy it there, but you can get it from Costco there as well. And the good news is no higher costs for seed, no yield drag, roasting. If I had soybeans, I'd roast some suckers, because now the protein, which is a fancy protein, becomes more rumen bypass, more amino acids. And that's what that mammary gland is looking for out there as well. And we can see a reduction in purchase feed costs. Trust me, the Chinese aren't going to buy my soybeans. I might feed them to my dairy cows because they're cheaper than what? Fuzzy cottonseed. Because we don't grow a lot of cottonseed in Illinois. Okay, why is that fat so important? The reason it's important is because if we get it right, you'll see that this fat comes down here, and this is that rumen-friendly fatty acid. That's why your butter is saturated, unlike making it from soy oil or corn oil. Now, the bad news is, if you got the wrong kind of butterfat in there, we'll move on this quickly, you can see it goes down this path, and this is the evil stuff right here. That's the stuff that will take that butterfat test from a 3.6 to a 3.2. 10 or 12 grams. 10 or 12 grams. If that sneaks through the rumen, it ends up getting down here. Now, ideally, it would go all the way. But a lot of things in life are not ideal at this stage of the game. So that's the big deal with oleic acid, because oleic acid does not go over here. Polyunsaturated fats do. And that's how we argue how much polyunsaturated fatty acids can your cows tolerate. Being somewhat conservative, 500 grams. How many grams of polyunsaturated fatty acids are your cows getting today? And if you're feeding corn grain and corn silage and fuzzy cottonseed, let me tell you, you're there. You're there out there in the program. So this comes from Michigan State. I'll let you read that. Simply says it's a no-brainer. Anybody here grow soybeans? Anybody growing soybeans on the farm? Show of hands. I got a few hands going up. You better look at this slide. Because it says, if you want that butterfat, and you'll see why I say if here in just a minute, you can take and feed relatively high levels of this product, 4 to 6 pounds. That's a lot of roasted soybeans. Now, if it's raw, you can't go that high. Why can't I go that high? It's soybeans. Because of trypsin and protein inhibitor in raw beans. And that's why you don't feed it to your pigs, your chickens, or calves. Because the rumen knocks that out at low enough levels. And this is from Michigan State, so take that with a grain of salt. These farms, you're feeding roasted soybeans, we're saving $1 to $1.40 income over feed costs because they are growing those soybeans and roasting them locally. There's a potential another $1 if you're raising them. What are you paying for these beans? Oh, a couple bucks a bushel if your neighbor's going to grow them for you, because they have value. They have value. Think about that. That's the whole talk here. 40 minutes is to have you go home and think about one or two things and say, you know what, that old guy from Illinois, I don't believe everything he says, but there might be a couple take-home messages there as well. Okay, this just got brand new data. You have not seen this before. This is a study that's pulled together from data that's published in the literature. And they're looking at 3 different kinds of fat sources. One is palm salts. This shows items of dry matter intake. This one does what to dry matter intake? All the research says it drops intake. Is that good or bad news for you guys? That's kind of bad news. Here says your palm oil. You can see a slight increase in dry matter intake. Here's milk yield. Here's milk yield. So you can see nice increase there. Those are in kilograms. So we're talking, 3.5 pounds more milk. That's milk yield. Now here comes butterfat. Now there's a whole bunch of tables. You're seeing 3 of the 8. This is milk fat. Now write this down or remember it. You can see here's palm. Everybody talks about palm. Who's feeding palm oil? Anybody feeding palm oil here? Got a couple hands going up. You can see about 111 grams. That's 1/4 pound fat you would get back based on the research. And there's 13 studies in here, so it's pretty good data. Even if some of you veterinarians don't believe in data, it is good data. It is good data. What about cost? He looked ahead 6 months and says, what does that do with the new current prices butterfat paid to farms. And you can see these two lost money. Yeah, the cows gave you more milk, more fat. But you look at cost, this is the only one that was positive out there in the program. So, thanks to Paul, it's all his fault. These are his slides. Number one, it says these fats, these dry fats are going to cost you anywhere from 70 to 90 cents a pound. They're going to give you a quarter of a pound of milk fat. With today's price, that's worth 40 cents. You can put your Dutch hat on, put 80 cents in and get 40 cents back. Only the federal government can make that work. Okay, obviously there's Republicans over here, in this corner. So think about that. And I was telling a couple of other of you at the booth, this is going to get pretty exciting as some of these feed additives. Same question. Can I keep those feed additives in there? Can I get my money back, at least break even? This one says, probably not. Now, roasted soybeans and cottonseed probably will be okay. But you think about that as we come into 2026. Here's the second one. And Andy alluded to it as ready. My first question is, what are we going to do with all this butter fat if you and I can't eat it all? We're eating 6.6 pounds of butter. We'll eat 7.5. Back in the good old days, before we thought it was dangerous, we were up over 8 pounds of butter. Can we eat it? Can we export it? A little bit of those crooks in Europe and New Zealand. Number two, you guys don't make cheese. But those crooks in Wisconsin and New York do. And there's a ratio of protein to fat to make cheddar cheese. And so now they're unhappy because now they have to go out and buy what? Milk protein to make cheese. And to get the same characteristics, flavor, and cuttability, sliceability. They have to go out and either buy milk protein to put in there as well. And so Andy already mentioned that in his talk. I did not hear it from Andy, but I heard it from another source. There are going to be some co-ops that are going to put down a fat limitation. It says, if you got 4.8 fat, I'll pay you for 4 or 5. Andy, you said you had a lower number. 4.2, 4.3. It's happening. There could be a quota. Illinois has a milk quota. Could our co-op said, well, we're just going to put a fat quota on top of it at this point? Food for thought. Food for thought. What would that do to you folks if that happened out there? 2 slides on amino acids. My bias is, here's where the future is coming. Now, I don't know what that means for you folks in this market. I really don't know. Some very classic work out of Ohio State. Again, coming from Norman St. Pierre's group. And this is one of their studies. 17% protein, which is pretty typical. But look at here, guys and gals. You can see about 8 pounds more milk. To have your attention, 8 pounds more milk. And protein-wise, you can see a nice bump in milk protein, which I will get paid for in Illinois. You folks here in Georgia. And you can see their MUNs came down, milk urea nitrogen came down, and there was more money on the table per day using these amino acids, and that happened to be blood protein. Probably don't do much of that here in Georgia. But blood protein has an excellent lysine value out there in the feeding program. So what about these amino acids? Dr. Jimmy Clark put this together several years ago, and it says if you're going to feed rumen-protected amino acids, and you're saying, oh, I'm in Georgia, Florida, I don't have to fool around with that stuff. You can see through 1 of 3 things could happen. Increased milk protein. Oops, you're not getting paid for that. Or you could see a nice increase in milk yield, like we saw at The Ohio State University. Or you might even see an increase in milk fat test, especially if it's methionine. So maybe you can't just wipe this off the table right now. Okay, let's wrap up. How are we doing on time-wise here? We got, we're okay? You don't realize how much slower I can go here, Bryce. Okay, let's go. So here's your take-home messages. How well are you going to grade out in my presentation? Well, what's the target? Well, I go to that great research journal called Hutjens Dairyman. And every August issue, they've got DHIR data, and you can calculate backwards. You can see the range of Holsteins back in 2025 and 26. When this comes out next year, that number will be what? It'll be higher. It'll be higher. So if you're the average DHIR herd in the United States, 4-2 on fat test, 3-2 on protein, and that ratio is 76%. What do those cheddar cheese guys want? 82%. So they're in love with who? Look at the brown Swiss. And back in the good old days, everybody knew brown Swiss would make you the most cheese on a 100-weight basis. Their problem was what? Not enough 100-weights. Not enough 100-weights to get the job done. Now, the good news for you Jersey guys, where's my Jersey folks? Any Jersey people here? I don't see too many hands going. The last year was the first time this number moved. So Jersey's moved. These three have not moved in the 10 years I've been watching this and monitoring this. Let's move on. Now, you saw the slide earlier. Same database. Won't spend any time on it. All I did on this one now is say, where are we below 4.3? And you can see that here in the 40 to 100 days, these are all in the red, which means what? Opportunity. Probably not getting the dry matter or the right ration or the right management. Probably has to do with mastitis. That's all I could figure out. Well, it must be something like that. But the question is, are you seeing this on your herd? Are you seeing these cows going down? And look at these fresh cows. They are what? They're sky high. Which means now these cows are what? Mobilizing body fat. Good news? Maybe. Bad news? Probably. We move on. And here you look at the protein. Really, this should be around 3.2, and it's not there. Probably for the same reason. Dry matter, amino acids, what are the factors? Powerful data. So you guys are taking pictures. This one, if you're Holsteins, should have taken this picture, and the one we had there a bit earlier. And here comes the jerseys. So I won't get in big trouble. I thought I'd get shot if I didn't. There we are. What else can you do with that butterfat number? I look at two things, especially in Illinois when you got 200 cows. On DHI, because I can look at each cow individually. You're probably going to use a software program. I'm going to ask, how many cows are what I call milk, fat, inverted? What do you mean by that? Well, it simply says the milk protein is higher than the fat test. That's not supposed to be that way. Some of that's genetic. How many of those you have more than 10%? Shame on you. You're doing something. And then the other one, of course, is milk fat depression. And that's where you get cows that are 1 full point below your herd. So you got a 4 butterfat test. How many cows are down at 3 or lower? I had a dairyman back in the good old days saying, that DHI record can't be right. How can a cow have a 2.8 butterfat test? And the answer is, she can have that low butterfat test. Here's your ones. You guys are getting milk, urea, nitrogen. You can see I argue this is the sweet spot. Right around 10, 11 milk, urea, nitrogen. Because when you start getting over 12, now you're in what? You're in the urine business. And maybe you guys here in Georgia get paid for urine. We don't in Illinois. If you get below 8, there's a possibility of what? The rumen microbes are short, and that means you're going to get fewer amino acids, which means your milk protein has to do what? Probably should go down. I did see your clock. It's really big down there. You realize? Holy smokers. I'm going to go slower because we're down to about 3 minutes. Powerful tool. If this thing moves more than 2 points, so you normally are 11, and it goes to 13, or it goes down to 8, you should ask, what did I change, or what did my nutritionist do to change that number? Why 2 units? Because those crooks from Iowa State says that's the normal variation you're going to see there. The normal variation. Kernel processing score on silage. Everybody in this room, when you've got corn silage, should be doing kernel processing score. It says, how good a job is your unit crushing the kernel of corn, especially if it gets drier. And the magic number here, according to Wisconsin, is going to be around 70. The new number is what? 75. 75. If you can see corn in your corn silage, shame on you. Because you're going to see it another time. And unless you're running pigs behind your dairy cows, it's gone. It's gone. Fecal starch. Not many people running these. Take examples when we're running a fecal starch. It simply says what percent of the starch, it's called apparent digestibility, should be 97%. Shouldn't be much starch in manure. Wonderful tool. This could come from corn silage, could come from corn grain. Simply says some starch is getting out in the manure. And your cows are not getting any value. If that number gets over 5%, guess what you can do now? Come to Illinois and buy some more corn. Because you can feed it twice to make up for that loss out there in the feeding program. This comes from the Minor Institute. These are the guidelines for particle size. I'm not going to spend any time on it. Another talk for another day, but we're not very excited anymore about this one right here. And if you got much in this top box, it better be shorter than an inch. Because you know what your cows in Georgia are going to do with stuff that's over an inch? They're going to sort it. They're going to sort it. So the real magic number all of us are using now is this one right here, the second box. And these are our guidelines for total mixed ration. This would be grass silage, hay silage, alfalfa silage. This would be corn silage with a 3/4 inch theoretical length of chop. Notice there's no sorghum data up there. I have no idea what that number should be. When the people at the booth said they're going to chop it shorter because they're crushers. The berry crushers will tear up the berries and the fiber length. Every one of you have these numbers. And if you don't, that's your third assignment. Number one, what does it cost? These are Illinois numbers. That's before the USDA came out with the new estimates on corn. These numbers would be a little bit lower. But these are market values for feeds, forages, feedstuffs. And you can see our cost, about $6.50 a cow a day. That becomes important because it depends on how much milk you get. That's 13 cents a pound of dry matter. That's 49 pounds of dry matter. So it's not really high elusive production. Here is your cost. 80-pound cows, about $8. That's going to be important for some of you smaller dairymen because if you're in the dairy program, the word is what? Maybe they talked about that yesterday. You're going to get paid. You're going to get paid for the first 5 million pounds. Or is it 6 million? What? 6 now. Get her 6 million pounds. So you 1,000-cow dairy aren't going to get rich over this, but it's going to pay. It's going to pay. Income over feed cost, you can see her is sitting here with 80-pound herd average about $12. And that's what I need to cover all the bills. So it says if you're not getting 80 pounds of milk in Illinois, with these inputs, you better sell some dairy beef. And then here's my feed efficiency. Notice 1.63, 1.43. If you're in the dairy business and you're running this as a business, then you have to have these 4 numbers keyed in for Florida, Georgia, or wherever you want to go. So is 8 pounds really honest? Now, Andy just kind of blew me up last night when I talked to him because he's got 9-pound herds. This is our top herd in Illinois, registered Holstein herd. They're averaging 110 pounds of milk. And they have a 4/8 butterfat test. Will they get paid for it? Now, if you think 4/8's high, Mike Van Amberg says they are working with a herd in New York State, unique genetics, and they are now getting 8 pounds of fat. 8 pounds of fat per cow. These cows are pretty fresh. You can see average 170 days of milk, and there's your 8.9 pounds of fat. And our big herd, Illinois, is right there with them, with 3,300 cows under a quota. Now, will my co-op back this down? Probably not, because they have a cheese plant. If you're Michigan, they're not going to back that down, because Michigan milk, guess what they're going to make? They're making it right now. Indian milk, which has how much butterfat in it? 6%. 6% fat. And you say, it'll never sell. There's 5 states that have a lot of Indian people living in them. One is Illinois. And they like that milk. That's what they're used to. So where is this future going to go out here as well? And with that, there's my take-home messages. And we're just out of time. We just ran right out of time. So I'll let you read that at your leisure. Take-home messages. Get that milk yield. Get that dry matter intake of these cows. And here's the tools that you have to take a look at that as well. And with that, we will stop and see if you have a question or an argument. You saw that too, didn't you? That could be really important. Yes, sir. Paul? Make it easy now.
In one of your slides, you showed 30% NDF digestibility, and the other one 240 on UNDF.
Yeah.
Is the 240 your standard for comparing forages?
I think everybody heard it. I use for digestibility, I use NDF digestibility 30 hours, because how long do you think that forage is going to stay in that cow? About 30 hours. And if you get it short enough and high enough quality, it'll be less than that. Ask those New Zealand crooks. We got that lush pasture. And that feed will be going out in 8 to 12 hours. It'll clear the digestive tract. Now, why did I change hours? Because UNDF 240 is what the researchers say is the gospel. And that's what the labs are printing. So I'm not going to put down UNDF 30, because you won't get it. It won't be on your sheet. So that's why I changed the 2 hours. Great question. You were wide awake. I'm impressed. Normally he naps through these, but he's right on top of it. Right. What? I won't go there. I won't go there. Another slide comment. I won't go there as well. Okay. Great question. Anything else for good the cause? I'm not sure we have much time left. I think we used most of it. I thought I'd pick a little time up.
I'm not seeing any. Well, Dr. Hutjens, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Dr. Mike Hutjens.
Thank you so much for the